The 53rd School Festival finally arrived, with balloon-filled gates welcoming the visitors. Amid the bustling crowd, Class 1B prepared to screen their independent film, marking the beginning of awkward moments, quiet hopes, and emotions that would slowly come to light. Inside the dark, crowded room, a woman named Hanju sat silently, a hoodie with animal ears covering part of her face. Her gaze was fixed straight ahead, holding regret and unease, as if admitting that the decision she made back then might have been too reckless, yet could no longer be taken back. With slightly trembling hands, she adjusted the volume control, choosing to move forward despite her doubts. Not because she was completely confident, but because there was a strong desire to give a chance to the feelings and the decision she had already made. The screen suddenly displayed a scene no one had ever expected, an intimate recording that was meant to remain hidden. The room erupted in chaos, whispers and shock intertwining as a long-buried secret was finally exposed before everyone's eyes. Panic spread instantly among the Class 1B students. Pale faces and frantic voices questioned one another, realizing that the film they were supposed to screen had been overtaken by an unexpected shock, a fatal mistake that could no longer be stopped. Someone pounded violently on the door, the sound shattering the silence. Panicked shouts demanding it be opened signaled the urgency of the situation, as if impatience and anxiety could no longer be contained. Inside the dimly lit room, a new student named Shirasawa was forced to face the instrument. His hands were pressed harshly against the keys, making him grimace in pain. The adults around him showed no empathy, only cold demands for the sound to be stopped immediately. 1 month later, time passed on. From the outside, the school seemed calm once again, as if the previous incident had been buried by routine. The story then shifted to a library storage room, a quiet place that became the starting point of a small change that would influence the relationships between the characters. Inside the quiet library storage room, the days returned to their usual rhythm. Shirasawa sat back in his chair, trying to convince himself that everything was normal again. He continued attending school as if nothing had ever happened, even though that calmness felt fragile, built on denial rather than peace. Alone in the room, Shirasawa spent his time watching a random movie, complaining about how boring it was. His expression was lazy, his mind empty, as if he were simply killing time without truly engaging. Yet as his hand reached for the tape and turned it off, it became clear that this solitude wasn't just about entertainment. It was a way to avoid something still weighing heavily on his heart. A scandal that should have shaken an entire century passed by without a trace. The teacher's affair, the leaked sex video, and the chaos of the school festival became nothing more than trending searches on phone screens. Loud for a moment, then forgotten. The school acted swiftly, social media was silenced, the teachers resigned, and everything ended without any real uproar, as if nothing had ever happened. Shirasawa was not expelled from school. Instead, he was given a 2-week suspension, a half-hearted punishment that felt more like a formality. Behind his flat gaze and the hand pressed against the desk lingered a strange feeling, as if he had been dragged into something he didn't yet fully understand. It all began on the day of the school festival preparations. A sudden touch, a classmate calling his name. From that moment on, the course of Shirasawa's story slowly shifted, and without realizing it, he had already stepped into a point of no return. During the festival planning meeting, a classmate pleaded with him. With flushed cheeks and hands clasped tightly together, she made a simple request, to help record the class film. Because his father was a movie director, the reason sounded trivial, even coincidental. But this was where Shirasawa's involvement began to deepen, slowly binding him to a chain of events he had never imagined before. The decision was made with little thought. With a brief agreement and an answer given far too easily, Shirasawa's role as the official cameraman was set. Everyone looked excited, unaware that this simple choice would become the quiet beginning of a chaos destined to erupt later on. But beneath his hesitation, there was another feeling Shirasawa couldn't hide. For the first time, Shirasawa felt brave, because he could finally show his secret hobby to the entire class. The story on the screen ended with awkward laughter. The result that was supposed to be shocking instead felt ordinary. Behind the camera, a faint smile appeared, not out of satisfaction, but from realizing a bitter truth. The effort he had been so proud of wasn't as special as he had imagined. Outside the room, laughter and happiness felt distant. Everyone seemed to be enjoying the festival, yet his heart was filled with doubt. As Shirasawa walked away, a single sight stopped him in his tracks. His eyes widened, realizing he had seen something he never should have. And from that moment on, everything began to change. From that moment on, curiosity turned into obsession. Shirasawa began following them, until he finally witnessed the truth with his own eyes. Behind the teacher's calm demeanor lay something he had never imagined. And from that instant, the line between admiration and shock completely collapsed. Fatigue still lingered on Shirasawa's face as he sat staring at the screen. Excuses about festival duties and exhaustion sounded like justifications, yet his mind was clearly elsewhere. A small temptation appeared by accident, something he should have ignored, but which slowly began to draw his attention. On an empty school bench, his mind was haunted by a bitter reality. Shirasawa realized that his place at school had collapsed, replaced by cynical stares and rejection. Those harsh words echoed clearly. A warning not to show his face again in a place that once felt ordinary, now transformed into a space filled with pressure and isolation. Shirasawa returned to the library storage room, spending his break time watching the old tapes kept there. His membership in the library committee gave him the perfect excuse to be alone. Beneath that quiet calm, Shirasawa was seeking a small escape, a safe place to withdraw from the stares and voices of the outside world. The silence was suddenly broken. A girl appeared before him without a sound, looking at him calmly while holding a book in her hands. Her brief greeting caught him off guard. The distance was too close, the gaze too direct. In that fleeting moment, the quiet space that had long been his hiding place changed, marking the beginning of an unexpected encounter. With a calm demeanor, Hanju asked him to follow the rules of the room, offering her help as if everything were perfectly normal. Shirasawa remained awkward and nervous, replying with a reflexive apology while his racing heartbeat still hadn't settled. The brief interaction felt stiff yet sincere, a simple exchange that slowly eased the distance, marking the beginning of a connection born from coincidence and quiet hesitation. In that quiet space, Shirasawa's attention was drawn to small details he had never noticed before. A simple writing tool, a strange book in her hands. From there, he began to realize one thing. Hanju was always immersed in a world that felt odd and different. And without him realizing it, a quiet curiosity slowly began to take root. The silence was broken by a question that came far too suddenly. Hanju stepped closer without hesitation, close enough to leave Shirasawa speechless. In her sharp gaze and calm tone, a clear sense of curiosity emerged. And from that moment on, their conversation truly began. In a quiet voice, Shirasawa admitted what he had done, a small decision with far-reaching consequences. Hanju simply listened, took notes, then looked at him with an expression that was hard to read. There was no anger, no judgment, only a silent acceptance, as if that simple conversation carried a meaning far deeper than the words spoken. After their brief exchange, Hanju turned and left the room. At the doorway, she paused for a moment and glanced back, meeting Shirasawa with a gaze that was difficult to interpret. In that silence, Shirasawa realized, this fleeting encounter was not merely a coincidence, but the beginning of something that would linger in his memory. Before leaving for good, Hanju looked back once more. With a calm expression and a light tone, she asked a simple question. It wasn't a grand question, nor an accusation, yet it was enough to unsettle Shirasawa's composure and mark the beginning of a deeper conversation. Shirasawa froze in place. His heart skipped a beat, eyes widening as he struggled to grasp what was unfolding before him. A hesitant word slipped from his lips, swallowed by the quiet. A fleeting moment where confusion, vulnerability, and an unfamiliar emotion quietly began to bloom. His thoughts drifted far from the room. Fragments of old memories surfaced, smiles that once felt warm, now lingering as quiet distance and unspoken regret. Questions meant for others slowly turned inward, becoming doubts about himself, about a past he had never dared to face. In silence, he clasped his hands together, holding his breath, as if trying to steady a heart unsettled by feelings that refused to fade. Behind the calm on his face, Shirasawa recalled his father's words. He tried to convince himself that those admired by so many were still just ordinary people, human, imperfect, and quietly flawed. Those words were finally spoken calmly, without unnecessary justification. He affirmed that no one is ever truly perfect. Everyone is simply trying to endure, one day at a time. For him, the goal was not to be extraordinary at every moment, but to offer small reasons, just enough for others to keep believing in a better tomorrow. Days at school went on, filled with light jokes and teasing that never truly reached his heart. Shirasawa answered them with a faint smile, choosing to carry his exhaustion alone. As always, his steps led him back to the library, arms full of books, searching for a moment of calm. There, he returned to an old habit, planning a small escape through films, a simple way to close a day that felt ordinary, yet quietly draining. The silence in the room suddenly felt different. A faint sound caught Shirasawa's attention, stopping him in front of the door. Hesitantly, he leaned closer and placed his palm against the wall, wondering if someone else was inside. Behind his calm expression lingered a quiet unease, the feeling that something unexpected was waiting just beyond the door. In an instant, Shirasawa's eyes widened. A sudden realization struck his mind, stealing his breath, something he clearly hadn't expected, as his quiet intuition turned into undeniable shock. Beyond the open door, the truth was laid bare. Hanju sat frozen, her face flushed, surrounded by things that were never meant to be seen by anyone. In that painfully awkward silence, everything that had remained hidden was quietly exposed. Shirasawa's gaze froze instantly. What he saw went beyond his expectations, throwing his thoughts into disarray. His heart raced as question after question flooded his mind, all unanswered. Before him, Hanju appeared caught in a moment he was never meant to witness. The silence turned heavy with pressure, marking an awkward instant destined to change their relationship forever. Shirasawa swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. Heat rose to his face, his mind still clouded by a shock he had yet to fully comprehend. Behind his silence lingered nervousness and confusion, an unfamiliar feeling that marked how deeply the moment had etched itself into his heart. The situation turned awkward, thick with tension. The distance between them was too close, making each breath feel heavy as embarrassment could no longer be hidden. Shock mixed with nervousness on their expressions, revealing that this moment had crossed the bounds of comfort for them both. Within the silence, Shirasawa quietly took it all in, his emotions capturing the scene, imprinting it deeply in his memory. The restrained tension finally reached its breaking point within Hanju. Shame, panic, and an uncontrollable impulse collided, pushing the situation further out of control. Shirasawa was left overwhelmed by a mix of shock and confusion, unsure how to process the emotions surging between them. In the quiet classroom, Hanju stood frozen, her body tense and her face flushed as she realized her position could no longer be hidden. Her breathing grew heavy, unable to move. Meanwhile, Shirasawa remained motionless behind the screen of his phone. His hands trembled, his heart pounding loudly. What met his eyes was more than just a shock. It was a dangerous moment unfolding before him. The hands of the clock kept moving, yet time itself seemed to freeze. Shirasawa stared at his phone screen, his eyes trembling, caught between panic and disbelief at what he had just captured. On the other side, Hanju jolted in shock. Her eyes widened, her breath hitched, and heat rushed to her face as she realized one undeniable truth. She had been seen. Shirasawa flinched. Without looking back, he turned and ran, his heart pounding wildly, as if trying to escape the weight of guilt and panic. Hanju remained where she stood. Her gaze followed Shirasawa's retreating figure, her face still burning. Not a single word was spoken. The school corridor lay deserted as Shirasawa ran farther away, his mind in turmoil from what had just happened. He wanted to escape as far as possible, as if by running, every trace of panic and shame could be left behind, fading into the emptiness behind him. Shirasawa's steps came to an abrupt halt in front of the restroom door. His breath was ragged, his body still trembling as he struggled to calm himself. He lowered his head, staring at the phone clenched in his hand. The realization struck slowly, yet relentlessly. He had recorded something without truly thinking it through. On the screen, Hanju's figure appeared clearly, frozen in that moment. Meanwhile, back in the classroom, Hanju remained behind, utterly alone. Shirasawa flinches as his phone suddenly rings. Standing right there is Hanju. With a calm but firm voice, she confirms one thing without hesitation. Shirasawa is indeed inside. There's no way to escape. Hanju forces the door open and demands the truth. Shirasawa falls silent, and in that moment, the secret finally stands between them, impossible to ignore. With a trembling yet steady voice, Shirasawa finally speaks, ready to face whatever consequences honesty might bring. But Hanju says nothing. She only stares at the video on her phone, her gaze heavy, holding feelings she isn't ready to put into words yet. Hanja drifts into her own world, her breathing uneven, cheeks flushed, as if pulled by emotions she can no longer control. On the other side, Shirasawa stands frozen, shock and confusion colliding as he realizes he has just seen a side of Hanju that was never meant to be revealed. The situation spirals out of control. Shirasawa panics and instinctively shouts, demanding his phone back. Hanja freezes, the words hit too sharp, instantly tightening the tension between them. The distance suddenly feels too close, emotions rising before either can think straight. In an awkward split second, Shirasawa stumbles backward, nearly losing his balance. The conversation stops, but the tension has only just begun. The tension slowly fades. Hanju smiles instead, calmly praising the recording, as if the chaos moments ago never happened. Shirasawa is caught off guard. And it's not just because of the compliment. Hanju looks at him calmly, as if she had anticipated every reaction from Shirasawa from the very beginning. Her words come out casually, leaving him frozen in place. Since the school festival, Hanju has been quietly drawn to Shirasawa's work. Hanju suddenly does something completely unexpected, freezing Shirasawa in place. His face turns red, not a single word able to escape his lips. It's not just what happened, but Hanju's boldness, crossing an unspoken line, creating an awkward moment that lingers vividly in his mind. In a gentle voice, Hanju asks Shirasawa to accept her for who she truly is. Shirasawa remains silent, sitting still without a single word, caught between confusion and emotion, unable to respond as the moment quietly sinks in. It was during that time in the boys' bathroom after school that Shirasawa learned that girls' panties were see-through.